So for today's discussion, I'm going to be giving an example of each type of control system, which would be feed forward, concurrent, and feedback control. And so first of all, feed forward. Control happens before an activity even begins. So a good example would be, restaurant preparing for a busy night. They're obviously, they're going to prepare differently for a Friday night, the start of the weekend versus, a Tuesday afternoon. It's going to be a lot different. They're going to need more staff. They're going to need help to prevent problems before they even happen, like running out of food or being understaffed. And this is just a couple of things to prepare for different types of events, or just a business being ready for anything and everything. So next is concurrent control. So this kind of takes place during, the process. An example of this is, kind of would be a personal trainer. So working with a client during a workout, while the person is exercising, the trainer watches, their form, make sure they're doing the right amount of reps. If they're doing too much weight, they're going to tell them to lighten up the weight. If they don't think they're doing enough weight, tell them to, move more weight. And so, if they're doing something wrong, it gets fixed immediately. And, this helps prevent injury and, improves performance. And, so concurrent control is about monitoring and adjusting while something is happening. A trainer's a good example. I would also say, I play golf, so a golf instructor, they're watching you hit golf balls. They're going to give you feedback. They're going to tell you if something looks off in your setup, or, they feel like, you could be doing this better or that better, just help you with overall efficiency. So, when it comes time to play and play under pressure, you're ready and you feel like you're in a good spot and you feel like you're more in control. So, and finally, I would say feedback control. This happens after, the activity is already completed. So a good example, would be a business reviewing customer feedback. There's a lot of, businesses who want customers to take surveys and, kind of give their feedback on what's good, what could be better, and, just kind of be an anonymous feedback of what a company is falling short of and, what they're exceeding at. So they might look for reviews, sales, data, or, complaints to see what, went well and what didn't, right? Then they use that information to improve future products. This type of control focuses on learning from results